Okay.
Homemaker is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as someone who takes care of the home rather than having an employment outside of it. And, parentheses, typically applied to women. So today I want to ask you a question. Women, have you ever had to think about how the possibility of having kids in the future may impact your professional life? Men, have you? I know that I have. Because the more I grew up, the more I got birthdays and grew into an adult, I started to think about different possibilities for my life. My job, a career, my education. And having kids was something that I've seen a lot of my peers talk about. Say, what am I gonna do if I'm gonna have a kid and a job doesn't wanna hire me, or I get fired because they don't wanna see me get pregnant and not be productive? I think this is a shame, because I think that people only should be allowed to decide over their own lives what they want to do freely without the fear of having a gender stereotypical norm applying to them and having to decide between their career and having their own family. Since 1989, about 600% of men that are homemakers have increased, and today they are about 23%. So you can imagine the numbers back then when our parents were younger. So to give you a perspective into what I want to do today is not only to empathize but also encourage the idea that men can be homemakers without this being a way of giving less value to their life as men or to their masculinities. Because we need to address that in this patriarchal society, there is a systemic force that is bringing men to comply within certain norms and certain ideas that are also affecting directly to women. Rita Segato is an academic from Argentina that says that there is something called the mandate of masculinity. What do you mean by the mandate of masculinity? After her studies, she discovered that society puts this certain pressure on men to not only have certain characteristics between their bodies and the way they speak or the way they do things, but it showed that society puts pressure into men by other men to perform certain violence. I know that this may sound like it is a way to give like an apology to men because they harm women, but that's not at all it. What happens around here is that men have this idea that they have to be masculine or they have to be a certain way, not because they are consciously trying to harm, but because other men and the historical context of it has made them to be. So I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to explain why women may have this enormous idea that we deserve respect and we deserve our decisions over our own bodies and our own lives. And so I started to ask myself, why am I always the one speaking about my rights and trying to convince everybody that I may be entitled for them? So to be a homemaker, as many of you may know, means to take care of the home, take care of the family, and do certain things, as the Oxford Dictionary says, that is not considered an employment outside the home. And sometimes this is undervalued. This is not seen really as a job or something that is essential for society, or it simply undermines the women that stay at home. But if there's not really a choice, if there are not really enough men willing to stay home, take care of the kids, and have this radical idea that maybe women can be providers, they can have jobs, they can have careers, maybe things will be different. As a woman, I think I've done enough things for gender throughout my life, and just thinking about all the things I have done, debated, protested, read books, go to courses, it's just tiring to get to a point in which you keep fighting and no one keeps listening. So today I want to ask you another question specific. Could you ever imagine of a world in which men and women could maybe have the decision entirely over their careers, over their bodies, and over their possible children? Another thing that I want to take into account is that this affects directly to women, obviously, because it not only puts the pressure on them to be homemakers, but it also judges them when they decide to have kids and also have a career. Because if you work, if you go to from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you are trying to be a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, they sometimes ask the question, who's taking care of the kids? Does your husband help you? Instead of simply considering that maybe they both have responsibility. Another thing that has been changing over the years is that in comparison to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, the age of our grandparents or our parents, women were stay-at-home moms, and they didn't really could imagine a world in which they could get outside the home and still take care of their family. So what happened? What happened here is that it began to be promoted, mainly in the US and then spread around the world, as something needed so that they will be valued as women and as mothers. So the idea that someone could be a mother, a teacher, an academic, a psychologist, or any other thing was out of the picture. So how can I make men empathize over the idea that not necessarily their future wives have to be homemakers? What can we do to give this idea a change? As someone that has been into the position in which you are in a family dinner and you hear someone, especially cousins or teachers, asking you, why are you studying? How long do you plan to study after you get married or have a child? And this, instead of giving you the possibility of thinking it on your own, it puts certain pressure into, what if I don't want it? So it has affected in many different ways, not only to the women that don't want to have children, but also to the women that want to have children. And sometimes this may cause a certain effect into not only having pressure to be this, but also to be judged if you're not all of the things you can be. So I want to recall a trend on Instagram and TikTok that went on a few months ago, where women were asked, if you were alone in the woods and you encounter a man or a bear, who will you rather see? And the answer was as clear as water: the bear. People, well, not people, women who are people, did not exactly say men just because they hate men or because they think that men are the worst thing in society, but they did notice something. Most violence comes from men, and the argument was that a bear will not ask them what they were wearing or abuse them before or after it slaughtered them. Albert Einstein said that the value on a man is not in what he can give, but rather in what he can receive. But I think there's something he looked past on. I think the value of a man is not necessarily on what he can give or take or receive, as he worded more kindly, but in the power of their character. So remembering Rita Segato and what she said about the mandate of masculinity, and also what she has said about homemakers and the role of caring inside a home, we need to remember something. if it was possible for men to think 1 second, what if my wife doesn't want to stay at home? What if I stay at home and take care of the kids? What if there's better possibilities, better economical possibilities? Because what if we both have to work because the economy is not enough, and we have 2 children, or we want to have children in the future, and there's not simply enough time for us to do everything? What will happen if men stop for 1 second and maybe think the idea that women don't necessarily have to have this pressure to be at home, and that being a homemaker is a job, and it's something that it's valuable, and it's something that takes care, takes time, takes a lot of things around it? What if we valued homemakers more and took into account all the different systemic, cultural, and historical contexts in which this idea of a homemaker has been brought to be applied only to women? So I want to ask you a question. Could you ever imagine a world in which you as women didn't have to ask yourselves what is going to happen with your career if you decided to be a woman in the future? Men, will you be willing to listen to them?